What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and the New York Giants are having their local pro day today, interviewing some really intriguing prospects that maybe they target in the first couple rounds of the NFL draft. A cornerback that we really like, a running back we like, a pass rusher we like. A lot of interesting prospects at the local pro day. Meanwhile, the Giants just had a third meeting with UNC quarterback Drake Maye, who you guys know I really like. I think is a very talented quarterback prospect. Of course, the Giants seem heavily interested in him. Will they be able to draft him? Who knows? The NFL draft certainly is a crapshoot, but it sounds like he's going top 3, so maybe they got to trade up for him. Meanwhile, Joe Schoen recently said he's open to all options, trading up, trading down, sticking and picking. Everything is on the table for the New York Giants in this draft. So we're going to kind of go through some of these prospects that they're meeting with, discuss our takeaways to the local pro day, who they have in for these meetings, and talk a little bit about Drake Maye and just kind of how we're feeling about him and the Giants' chances of landing him in this upcoming NFL draft. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss the episode, comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about the Giants interviewing some really intriguing prospects at their local pro day?
I'm doing great, man. And look, lots of stuff kind of flowing right now for the Giants. More so, you look at these different prospects coming to the pro day. Max Melton, even Audric Estime is going to be there from Notre Dame. A lot of people like him as a running back in the mid rounds. This Giants team has a chance to reinforce multiple positions that a lot of people would say are weaknesses. Now, Max Melton, I know a lot of people have him as a top 50 prospect in this draft class. He's a very solid player. And if there's one trend that I've noticed for the Giants, they're trying to actively get more athletic. And Deonte Banks was the #1 ranked athletic cornerback in last year's draft class. Max Melton is the #3 in this year's draft class, and a really strong class too. At least in the back end of the first, second round, there's a lot of really good players there. Even in the middle to the beginning of the first round, there could be some good talents like Cooper DeJean. So, I do think that right now, and not to mention Terrion Arnold, there's a lot of really great players at cornerback. Max Melton going a little bit under the radar for some guys because he's coming from Rutgers. Had a couple really good games this past season, and he's a maximum 100% effort guy. I really like him. I think he's 6 foot, 190 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. He's a little bit small, but he's feisty, and if you look at him, the dude's built, like absolutely ripped to shreds. So you love that about a young player with that level of upside. Athletic profile is really, really great. His completion percentage allowed, I think, was around 54% this past season. The guy just doesn't give up that many passes. He is really solid. He's a sticky corner, really good in zone as well. I think that as a developmental player, and Jerome Henderson being the coach there for the Giants at DB, you might say to yourself, and if he's there at 47, let's take a shot on him. Like, he's got the profile to be a very good NFL corner, and the best thing apart of him, and this is what Lance Zierlein said of NFL.com, he can play inside and outside. So if the Giants say to themselves, we're not really having a lot of success finding a slot corner, Cordell Flott's been really good on the outside, or Nick McLeod's been looking really solid, let's push Max Melton to the interior and, cross-train him, see where he lands, see where he actually blossoms. And I think that might be a good idea for the Giants to get a cornerback with a little bit of versatility to develop into a quality player in the inside or the outside. We saw the Giants try to move Adoree Jackson to the slot last year. It did not work. Darnay Holmes, he was traditionally an outside guy at UCLA. They moved him into inside. He struggled. Really good when it comes to stopping the run, really good at sniffing out screens, but just really was problematic at times in coverage. But, we'll see how the Giants operate at cornerback this year. They have a lot of players, maybe not so much talent, you could say. We like Trey Hawkins still as a developmental piece. We like Cordell Flott, but it's just not like what you'd want in a structured, rounded out defensive secondary, especially with the loss of Xavier McKinney. We don't know what they're going to do at free safety just yet either. So Giants are surely taking a different approach this offseason towards rebolstering that secondary, adding Brian Burns, losing McKinney. So curious to see what they do there. But, Anthony, what are your initial impressions of Max Melton? Really good player, star at Rutgers, good dude, high work ethic. His effort is there on film. I watched him chase a receiver down from the opposite hash, full speed. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. Dude is blazing fast. He can catch those guys across the field. You love to see those effort plays. He would be a really nice young player for the Giants to add if they manage to find a way to get him at 47. However, if you end up with a quarterback, maybe you're targeting the receiver class in the second round. So there are weaknesses across this roster we do need to address.
Yeah, there are needs to address on this roster, but I keep saying it, cornerback is one of the biggest needs to address. I really think this is going under the radar. Yeah, we're talking a lot about the Giants needing a quarterback, needing a receiver. There's other needs than just those two positions, though, and corner might be the biggest outside of those two. When you're looking at the defensive side of the ball, the Giants did a lot to shore up their pass rush, added talent at edge rusher with Brian Burns. We like who they have in their linebacker core. Safety still a need after losing Xavier McKinney, but opposite Deonte Banks, who is starting at cornerback and who's starting in the slot at cornerback? It's a big question mark. Nick McLeod could be the starter opposite Deonte on the outside, totally possible. Maybe the Giants sign a veteran after the draft. Maybe they go into the draft and they bring in a guy like Max Melton, who has the potential to start outside or inside. And if you want to fall in love with Max Melton as a prospect, you want to find one game to watch, go ahead and watch his tape versus Marvin Harrison Jr. and Ohio State. He did a really solid job against who many believe is the consensus top wide receiver in this upcoming NFL draft class. Now, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. won some of those reps. Of course, he wins against every cornerback he faces, he seems to win most of his reps. But there were some really nice plays on Max Melton's film in that game that I think you would really like if you want to dive into him. And just taking a look at his playing style, what he brings to the table. Physicality, aggression, tackling ability. And these are some of the traits that make you say, okay, maybe he's going to be better in the NFL in the slot. When you have a slot cornerback who can tackle, who can make plays and impact the running game, that's what's really important, because when you're going into those nickel formations and personnel packages, those dime packages, when you've got extra defensive backs on the field, those defensive backs better be able to tackle. Otherwise, you are going to get burnt in the running game, in your run defense game, and even in your run after the catch game. We've seen plays where the Giants maybe are in that nickel or dime package. Wide receiver screen goes for a first down on 3rd and long. How does that happen? Well, oftentimes it's because you don't have defensive backs who are aggressive enough and physical enough in the running game. Max Melton, though, fits that bill. He plays well against the run. He has aggression, and he has scheme flexibility. He plays well in man. He plays well in zone. You read the draft reports on him. They praise his ability to be versatile in his alignment and in his coverages and the way that he plays against wide receivers. So there's a lot to like here with Max Melton. You mentioned it, on some draft boards he's in the top 50, and others he's in the top 100. I think Pro Football Focus has him ranked 80th on their big board and said that he's a late day 2, early day 3 pick. But again, Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, thinks he's a day 2 pick for sure. So we'll see ultimately where he goes, but the Giants are interviewing with him, are hosting him at the Pro Day, scouting him. This is definitely a player to keep an eye on as we get to the NFL draft, because again, cornerback, a sneaky, massive need for this Giants team with so many question marks in the slot, on the boundary. Max Melton could do either one of those things potentially as a developmental player on day 2 or day 3, and could wind up being a very solid prospect for the New York Giants if they were to draft him and plug him into this defense that desperately needs a little bit more aggression in their cornerback room. So I really do like Max Melton as a prospect. Another cornerback prospect, Alex, that I do want to mention is Chow Smith-Wade out of Washington State. This is a player who really stood out in the Senior Bowl, had 2 interceptions in the Senior Bowl game. One was a diving grab, very impressive play that he returned all the way down to the 1-yard line. It was about a 60 or 70-yard return down inside the 5. It was a very impressive play. The other one was a Hail Mary at the end of the game, pretty meaningless, but still 2 interceptions in that game. You got to give credit to Chow Smith-Wade. He played really well throughout the entire week at the Senior Bowl. Undersized player, so again, maybe a guy you're talking about playing the nickel for you at the next level, but has good athleticism. And if you read again Lance Zierlein's scouting report on him, he said that Smith-Wade is a capable defender in zone or man, and that he could end up outplaying his draft slot due to his ball skills, competitiveness, and athletic traits. So Chow Smith-Wade, Alex, another player here who, again, undersized, but has made a lot of plays on the ball, has shown really good ball skills, very competitive and aggressive against the run. Could be a player that the Giants look at as potentially a developmental piece in the 4th, 5th round, day 3 player here that they had a top 30 visit with. I think I did forget to mention that was the most important piece here. The Giants had a top 30 visit with Chow Smith-Wade. Just again, a player who I think could add depth to this cornerback room as a potential inside-outside player with really good ball skills and competitiveness. Alex, what are your thoughts on that? And just kind of the idea here that going into the 3rd day of the draft, I know we're not even at the 1st day yet, but once we look ahead and we talk about day 2 and day 3, I think cornerback does need to be a high priority priority target for the Giants on that 3rd day of the draft as they add more developmental pieces in here. And I think that Chow Smith-Wade could be a really nice target.
Yeah, look, the truth is if you could find good developmental pieces with upside, one even elite trait in the mid-rounds, it's worthwhile trying to find some value in them in the NFL. And look, there was a cornerback, I want to say from Auburn. He was really, really small. Did he go to the Rams maybe? I forget what his name was. Really tiny guy. I remember talking about him. We're like, this guy could be pretty good. And I think he had like a couple interceptions in his first year, and he looked pretty solid. And I was like, wow, like this guy's tiny though. Sometimes it doesn't really matter about size. It matters about grit, right? It's all about what's in your heart and not what's outside. So, you like these smaller guys sometimes because, they got a chip on their shoulder. And, you look at a guy like Chow, probably has a chip on his shoulder. They had him for a top 30 visit, as you said. Senior Bowl standout. Why not take a shot in the mid rounds? 5'10", 184 pounds is really small. But look, sometimes those guys are just like sticky. They're like freaking glue. You know what I mean? Like those smaller guys, their lateral agility, their ability to mirror routes it shows up. You know what I mean? Like they're able to just freaking fly because of that size. Now you're probably going to get beat by bigger receivers with bigger wingspans, but you like those smaller guys against slot options sometimes, against smaller outside receivers. You know what I mean? So it may not hurt to try to take a gamble on a player like this and see what they can do. Obviously pretty good athlete here. He can jump out of the gym still, even despite his size. So you like to see that. He's aggressive in the run game. I like that. He's capable. And more so, like, if you're capable against zone, capable in man, and you're a mid-round pick and you got some nice traits, why not take a shot on a player like this? So if the Giants don't end up with a cornerback in the second round, I think first round we can probably rule out as an option. If they don't end up with like a Max Melton in the second round, I think a player like Chow could be a really solid alternative in the mids for a team that really needs support at cornerback. However, with that being said, I still think we need a veteran. I still think we need to sign somebody to help this team. However, I do believe that the Giants are going to wait until training camp, see who gets cut. There's always veterans that get cut, guys. Always. Guys clearing cap space. Maybe they lose a job. Maybe they lose a battle. Maybe a team wants to go with some youth. There's a myriad of reasons why teams move on from good players sometimes. Think about the Giants signed Logan Ryan a couple years back, and he ended up being a solid player for us. So, you see like these guys sometimes just, they don't get signed, whatever it might be. Who knows? Maybe Adoree Jackson comes back on a more team-friendly deal. It seems like he hasn't signed a deal yet. Maybe he's not getting what he wants. So we'll see how the offseason progresses in that regard and if they do bring in a veteran. But for now, I think it's safe to say a mid-round pick like a Chow could be a nice option for them. But, Anthony, tell me about Drake Maye. Giants meeting with him for a third time, maybe even a fourth time. They've met with him a couple times now. They skipped out on his pro day to have a private workout with him. We saw the Giants obviously have dinner. They go and meet Michael Penix Jr. Everyone's freaking out about that. Let's not forget, they've met with every quarterback prospect. This is not out of the ordinary. They're doing their due diligence on everybody. So, I'm not freaking out about any specific player, but Drake Maye has that gunslinging mentality that Brian Daboll seems to love. You've comped him to Josh Allen. Many people have made that link before as well. Good athletic profile. He's got a solid arm. He can be erratic, and that's very similar to Josh Allen. He was much better in college than Josh Allen, I would argue. But, if you look at how he can grow, what he can do. He had a 1.9% turnover-worthy play percentage last year, by the way, which is very low. A lot of people are like, he's like a turnover machine. Like, he makes ridiculous throws. I'm like, his turnover player-worthy rate was very low. Like, he's not like what many people are saying he is. He's a good kid, good energy. That's the type of guy you want in the life. He's a leader, a guy that leads with his voice verbally, but also by his actions. Obviously, like, the Giants, if they were to land Drake Maye, I think most of us would be happy. Brian Daboll was hired to develop a young quarterback. People are like, well, he had Daniel Jones at 24 years. I'm like, dude, Daniel Jones came with like 70 different bad habits, right? Throwing the ball off his back foot, doing so many bad things, throwing into risky scenarios when it was unnecessary, taking sacks, by the way, his pocket awareness when the Giants got him was horrendous when, Brian Daboll, got him from the previous regimen. Horrible pocket mobility. He took significant steps forward in his first season under the leadership of Brian Daboll in that regard. So his turnover rate reduced significantly. I think that you give a player a moldable ball of clay, and that's the way I see Drake Maye, by the way. Dude is just a ball of clay. Like, if the Giants were able to get him, that he is the perfect player you want to give to Brian Daboll. He could be anything. He could be a superstar. He could be a star. He could be a bust. But we hire Brian Daboll to develop young quarterbacks. Give him the ball of clay to mold. Daniel Jones came as an already molded clay, and they just were trying to chop away at it, trying to figure out how to get the statue underneath of that ball of clay. And the unfortunate reality is there was already kinks in the armor. There was already a lot of problems there. Not to mention the Giants failing to build around him with good receivers and good offensive line play. Drake Maye, ball of clay. Basically, it's just whatever you want to mold him into. Brian Daboll will have the luxury to do that. It's time to give him his player. What do you think about Drake Maye? Obviously, it could be any other player. It could be J.J. McCarthy. It could be Jaden Daniels. We don't know just yet. But in my opinion, Drake Maye is the most malleable piece in this draft class potentially.
Yeah, you can make that argument for a few of those guys, though. It comes down to personal preference. I think that Drake Maye is super moldable, as you're saying, but a lot of people feel that way about a J.J. McCarthy because he's only 21 years old and has only started a couple seasons and hasn't thrown the ball much. So people think that he's got a whole lot more molding left to be done. People also feel that way about Jaden Daniels just because he's so athletic. The ceiling is there. You can make him whatever you want him to be at the next level. You could really make that argument for all of these guys, but when you're looking at Drake Maye in particular, I like him for Brian Daboll. I think they're a match made in heaven just because of playing style, meeting offensive schematics, meeting prior history, right? And prior history being Josh Allen, again, very similar playing style coming out of Wyoming to what Drake Maye brings coming out of North Carolina. And keep in mind, guys, Josh Allen did not enter the NFL as a good quarterback. In fact, it took him 3 years to become good. He was terrible as a rookie for the Buffalo Bills. He was not good in his second season, but he started to show progress and growth and obviously flash potential here and there. By year 3, year 4 especially, he really turned it on. Him and Brian Daboll, they figured out what was working, what wasn't, and they made him into a star quarterback at the next level. But it took time, and that's one thing that I think you have to keep in mind with any of these quarterbacks that the Giants may end up drafting, whether it's one of those guys we just mentioned, whether it's Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix or Spencer Rattler, whoever it is, has to have time to grow under one coach, one head coach, Brian Daboll. That is really, in my opinion, what damned Daniel Jones, because Jones looked solid as a rookie. There was definitely potential there. Were there flaws? Were there kinks in his game? Abso-freaking-lutely, but he flashed a lot of potential. You can think of the highlights of that rookie season under Pat Shurmur and say, hey, I think the Giants messed up firing Pat Shurmur. That's probably what it ultimately came down to. Shurmur was not a good head coach for the Giants. Let me be clear. I advocated for the firing of him back then, and I don't think that they would have found a ton of success under him if they kept him. But Daniel Jones might have found more success because after he was fired and they brought in new guys, whether you're talking Jason Garrett, Freddie Kitchens, Joe Judge, the changes in coaching that Daniel Jones has had to endure have stunted his growth and development so badly and made him a player who probably never reaches the full potential of what he once had. And that's the main argument that I want to make here is the Giants, as you mentioned, had their third meeting with Drake Maye. They've had 4 meetings with J.J. McCarthy. They've had 3 meetings with Michael Penix Jr. They've met twice with Jaden Daniels of LSU. They've met with all these guys. They're doing extensive research. And as a side, that's important because they're considering drafting these guys. It's also important because any one of these guys could go to the Washington Commanders, and the Giants need intel on them. So keep that in mind as well. The Giants are in swinging range of drafting these players. The Commanders are getting one of these players without a doubt. So it is smart for the Giants to interview these guys. Whether you want them to draft a quarterback or not, don't criticize their process here. They're doing the right thing and getting as much intel as possible on these young quarterbacks who, again, one of them is at least going to be playing in their division. But back to the point that I was making here with the Giants looking at these players, and when you're taking a look at the development of the quarterback position, it takes time. If the Giants were to draft Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels, whoever it is, early in this draft, Brian Daboll needs to be given at least 2 years to really sink his teeth into this prospect. And I know that John Mara said drafting a quarterback doesn't necessarily extend the leash of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. In my opinion, it needs to. You got to give them the full 2024 season and at least half of the 2025 season to prove whether or not they're going to be able to develop this player. Because Brian Daboll has developed talent. He developed Daniel Jones better from where he was in 2021 to the end of 2022. He was a better player. Tommy DeVito, when he got to the New York Giants, by the time he was starting late in the season, was winning games because Brian Daboll knows how to maximize quarterback talent. Say the same thing of Tyrod Taylor. Brian Daboll just knows how to get the most out of QBs, but sometimes it takes time, especially with these young guys. So whoever the Giants draft, I hope that the ownership and management afford Daboll enough time to really sink his teeth into this prospect and develop it, because you are right. Brian Daboll was brought over here to develop quarterbacks, whether you want to say it was to develop Daniel Jones or develop his own guy. That was the main job here. He is a quarterback guru, a whisperer, so to speak, an offensive mastermind, if you want to call him that. That's what Brian Daboll was brought here to do. They got to give him a full opportunity to really develop a quarterback, whether it's Daniel Jones or a prospect that they draft early in this year's draft class. So, speaking of Drake Maye specifically, since you asked me my opinion on him, I think everybody knows my opinion. Very high on Drake Maye. I think he's absolutely worthy of a top 5 pick. I know that there's some current concern recently because certain analysts and scouts and draft minds are saying the weaknesses of Drake Maye, and that's not a new revelation. You know, those weaknesses have always been there. Erratic footwork, right? He's a little inconsistent in his base. Makes some throws where he doesn't see the secondary defender and throws it into coverage because he trusts his arm too much. He's had all these flaws this whole draft process. They're being highlighted now because we're getting closer to the draft. But all the strengths that were highlighted earlier in the draft process, those still exist too. They're just not being highlighted right now. So the cannon of an arm, the quick processing, the throwing over the middle of the field with accuracy and timing, the athleticism, the off-script ability, Drake Maye is a great quarterback prospect who I think that the New York Giants, and in particular Brian Daboll, would love to have because of his playing style being so similar to Josh Allen's. But Alex, before we move on to another prospect that the Giants are meeting with that I want to discuss, I want to get your take on that specific part of what I said for the quarterback development. It takes time, right? You think that drafting a quarterback does have to give Brian Daboll a longer leash? Do you agree with me? Or if the Giants are really bad next season, you think that they got to blow it up, they got to move on from Brian Daboll and bring in a new coach to kind of develop the quarterback? Or, are you kind of in the same boat as me? Give him at least a year and a half, a full season and then some to develop this quarterback, and give him a longer leash and give him time to let that QB grow.
Well, it's a really good question. And the simple answer is this. I would argue we saw the best version of Daniel Jones in Brian Daboll's first year with the Giants, right? And we all know that Daniel Jones came, as I said before, with a lot of problems inherited from Jason Garrett primarily. And, you saw the lack of footwork, you saw the lack of pocket presence, you saw the lack of this, saw the lack of that. And Brian Daboll managed to get him to at least get us to the postseason and win a playoff game during his first season with Daboll. If you give Daboll a clean slate, and for what it's worth, I do believe that Daboll's going to fix a lot of the problems he had last year in terms of his personality, rubbing some coaches the wrong way. He even addressed it recently and said, I need to be better in a lot of ways. So I think we're going to see much improvement there. I think that, everyone has something to improve, and Daboll found his weak spot. I think he can get a little bit too much of a hot-headed moments that spill over and maybe rub some people the wrong way, and ultimately it's bad internally, and we saw how bad it could get this offseason. So I think Daboll's going to get better in that regard. But the truth is, if they draft a quarterback, they're drafting a quarterback with the intention of Daboll and Shane continuing to build this team for the next 2 years, in my opinion. I really do believe that it is imperative, it is essential that the Giants give Daboll a freaking quarterback to develop. Now, why is it so important that it's this offseason, right? Why is it so important that it's this offseason? Well, next year's draft class is, by every account, and look, things can change, players rise, is going to be much worse than this year's draft class. John Mara said it blatantly 2 weeks ago. The front office told him the quarterback class this year is one of the best they have seen in a very long time, okay? That should tell you everything you need to know about how the Giants feel about the quarterback class. They can get a good player they can develop, right? I think that's an objective fact. Next year, free agency class is awful. Next year, the draft class is not as good as it is this year with quarterbacks. There is a couple of players in this draft class that could be great. Next year, maybe there's one, maybe there's two. The competition is going to be significantly higher. I just personally feel as though right now, if you wait to get the quarterback, not only are you wasting another year off of Dexter Lawrence's contract, you're wasting another year off of Andrew Thomas's contract, you're wasting another year of Brian Burns' new contract, you're wasting another year on Bobby Okereke's new contract, you're wasting rookie years off of some of your other players. I mean, guys, how many years do we have to waste off of some of our best freaking linchpin pieces to finally get a quarterback that we can build around? By the time we get a new quarterback 2 years from now, if we pass someone in this draft class, Andrew Thomas is going to be headed towards the final 2 years of his deal. Dexter Lawrence, final 2 years of his deal. You know what I mean? We're headed towards the end of our superstar players. You know, we need to capitalize on these elite NFL players right now. We need to get the ball freaking moving. We need to get the ball freaking rolling, because Daniel Jones' contract holds us back from signing anybody next season. If he is on this team next year, the Giants have this amount of money to spend next year. This amount. Zero. They have freaking no money, right? His contract, and look, you could restructure some deals, push money into the future, which ultimately hurts us down the road, but you don't want to have to do that. His contract castrates us. You know, I've talked about the contract 100 billion times. We can clear up to $30 million next offseason, which helps offset any draft pick that we give up to move up a couple spots. If we have to give up next year's first-round pick to move up to 3 and get Drake Maye, I am doing it without even blinking a freaking eye, because you're going to save $30 million next offseason. You're going to be able to pay a top receiver if there's one on the market. You're going to have a young quarterback with a year of experience and a couple of superstar players on both sides of the football in Thomas, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns to work with, right? And then maybe you add a superstar receiver next offseason and you're good to go, right? It is imperative to me that we get a quarterback this offseason, in my personal opinion.
I want to throw in there, because you just mentioned something, and this is a little off topic, but on topic. You mentioned maybe you trade for a wide receiver next offseason, whatever, draft one next offseason. How about the fact that Stephon Diggs just went for a 2025 second-round pick? I'm going to pat myself on the back here. Didn't I just say that on the podcast last week, that these wide receivers could go for future draft picks? I said maybe the Giants wait until training camp. They trade for Brandon Ayuk and a 2025 second-round pick. I kept saying it. You might not have to trade 2024 draft capital to land that wide receiver one this offseason. Maybe you wait it out and you trade 2025 draft capital and land a WR1. The Houston Texans just made that trade for Stephon Diggs. They are Super Bowl contenders now because they have a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract and now just traded for a WR1 that could hopefully be the catalyst to them getting even further into the postseason than they made it last year. The New York Giants should not wait to get themselves in a similar position. Get the rookie quarterback on the rookie contract. Find the bona fide established WR1 in the NFL that you could trade future draft capital for and build yourself into a solid football team. I've been making this argument. We're seeing the Houston Texans do exactly what you and I have been advocating for, Alex, drafting the quarterback, even though they had a bad roster last season. And I know not every quarterback steps into the NFL and is CJ Stroud immediately, but some quarterbacks are. And every now and then you get lucky and you do find a CJ Stroud early in the draft. And that's what the Texans did. They drafted CJ Stroud, even though their roster was terrible, had holes all over. They didn't build the roster, then bring in the quarterback. They brought in the quarterback. He elevated talent around them. And now, because he's on a rookie contract and they can afford to do it, they're bringing in superstar pieces to build around him, like Stephon Diggs. I love it. I love what the Houston Texans are doing. And if you think that maybe we're wrong sometimes in our analysis of the Giants, like, the Houston Texans are doing what we're advocating for the Giants to do. And everybody is now referring to the Houston Texans as potential Super Bowl contenders. That's all we want for the Giants, to just build the way that other really good NFL teams are building and become contenders along with those teams. So I just wanted to throw that out there, Alex. I hand it back to you. But the Stephon Diggs trade, again, exciting because we kind of hinted that a move like this could happen for the Giants or another team soon with a future draft pick being traded for a WR1. And I also think that it re-emphasizes the conversation that we were having last week about the Giants need to put themselves in a position to make a move like that, but they really can't do so until they get a quarterback on a rookie contract. I think that's really important to note.
I absolutely agree with you. And right now, I kind of feel like the Giants, if there is a receiver I'd be targeting, you could look at T. Higgins, you could look at Brandon Ayuk. Those are the two that stand out to me the most. Diggs' situation was a little bit interesting because of his, obviously, the contract, and they wanted to get rid of that. They had to clear some salary space, and the fact that he seemingly did not want to be on Buffalo anymore. I think he wanted to go to a different team, and landing with Houston, that team is going to be fun to watch next year. I'm actually pretty excited to watch the Houston Texans. They've just done it the right way, and look. And I know everyone loves Malik Neighbors. I know, and I love him too. And I love Marvin Harrison Jr. I love Rome Odunze. But what team has added a top receiver and didn't have the quarterback figured out that ended up winning, that ended up succeeding? It's not the way you build a team. You have to find the quarterback. Look at the Texans. They just set the example for how important it is to try and get your quarterback. I know they didn't have to trade up and get CJ Stroud, but it doesn't matter. It's about finding that player. And if you can find him and open up the salary space and get the great pieces, the Giants didn't just acquire Brian Burns. to build around Daniel Jones on that salary, on that contract. It logically, and look, thinking of the way Joe Schoen has and the positional value that he is focused on this offseason, there is no way anyone's going to convince me that Joe Schoen just acquired Brian Burns, one of the best pass rushers in football, just to try and win a Super Bowl with Daniel Jones at quarterback. There's no way in hell. And this is not because I hate Daniel Jones. I don't hate Daniel Jones. I just think the damage has been done. I think the era of Daniel Jones is ending because of all the other factors that have impacted him: the injuries, the high salary, the lack of offensive line performance, the wide receivers. This team needs to reset at the quarterback spot and then infuse this team with playmakers. That's what this team needs. It's objectively true. I think you would agree with that. And I think most people would. The question is, what is the quarterback situation going to be like when the Giants get to the draft board? What is it going to look like in terms of, do the Patriots want to move back? Do the Cardinals want to move back? Who's going to be there at QB4? Are the Giants going to want to move up? And who do they like? Who's available? There's a lot of questions to be answered here. But in my opinion, the Giants failing to walk away with their future quarterback in this draft class will set them back another couple years, because next year's class is weak. Next year's free agency class is non-existent. And the truth is, look, Malik Neighbors is great, but Daniel Jones isn't going to help us much in the future with that contract and that inability to expand this roster. We still have many holes on this roster, my friends. You know what I mean? We still have holes at cornerback, free safety, receiver, interior guard for now until proven otherwise. Right tackle until proven otherwise, although I love Jermaine Illuminor. Tight end's about to become a little bit of a question mark if Darren Waller retires. Love Daniel Bellinger, but we could use another pass-catching tight end there. We could use more depth at pass rusher. We need a lot more depth at cornerback, because right now I don't trust half of those guys. I don't see how the Giants proceed forward unless they get that quarterback, because it opens the freaking doors open for the possibilities. With that being said, I'll end my spiel there. I know, very passionate about this. Draft is coming up soon. I'm ecstatic, as you guys know. Many big surprises I anticipate. It's going to be really fun. But at the end of the day, Brian Daboll needs to be given the ball of clay that he requires. That's why we freaking hired the guy. We literally hired this guy to develop quarterbacks. Be pleased, for the love of God, give him one that he can make a superstar. Daniel Jones came with so many problems, so many issues that weren't even his to begin with, left over from poor coaching, poor regimens, poor performance. It just is not. It wasn't fair to Daniel Jones, and it's not fair to Brian Daboll to give him a guy that's already been beaten and bruised and battered, as the guy that's going to lead this franchise into the future. I don't blame it entirely on Daniel Jones, and I never have. There's a lot of factors that play into this equation, but even if it's J.J. McCarthy, if it's Jaden Downs, who I love, and I really like Drake Maye as well, I'd love to see Brian Daboll get his paws on one of these young players to develop and mold into the future of this franchise.
Me too, man. Me too. And I think we made that point pretty clear on many episodes, and I think we've really hammered it home in this episode, talking about the benefits of having a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract and potentially trading for a WR1 established in the NFL, and the ways that you can open that up through having a rookie. Again, I think the Houston Texans are such a prime example, trading future draft capital. It wasn't even a 2024 pick, a 2025 pick to get Stephon Diggs. That's the benefit of having that rookie quarterback that we've been advocating for the New York Giants. I mean, listen, my ideal offseason for the Giants, you land that QB in the first round, you trade that 2025 second-round pick for Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins over at training camp, something like that. That would be the dream come true. We'll see what happens. It's easier said than done. Before we wrap, though, I do want to throw out there Chop Robinson, pass rusher, Penn State. He also is meeting with the New York Giants today at their pro day, a guy that I really like, but I don't think is much of an option for the Giants after trading for Brian Burns. Robinson likely going at the back end of the first round, maybe early second. Don't think he's much of an option. But Alex, I'll let you give quickly before we wrap a take on Audric Estime, Notre Dame running back, at the Giants pro day. Another one of these prospects that maybe they target in the middle rounds. Could be an intriguing piece for the Giants. How are you feeling about Chop Robinson, Audric Estime meeting with the Giants, and where do you think that they could land for the Giants in the draft?
I mean, if Estime was there in the fourth round, he's a bulldozer, and he's got speed, he's got some decent contact balance, and he's a good kid. I grew up with him right across the street. Really great family, too. So, this is a really solid player, and I think the Giants should be drafting a running back in the mid-rounds, personally. I know you're an Eric Gray fan, you want to see what he can do, but if the Giants are there in the fourth round, and I don't think there's a Trey Benson, even in the third round, I don't even think Trey Benson will be there. So we'll see about that, but, truth of the matter is that if there is a good player with one elite trait, contact balance, speed, I love Jalen Wright as well. There could be an opportunity for the Giants to find a nice little piece here on offense. And God be told, this team needs more offensive playmakers after losing Saquon Barkley. So I don't estimate that. We're not going to be without a couple of surprises this draft class and maybe even via trade this offseason. This team is going to get more support on offense, believe it. It's just a matter of when, who, and where the Giants look to go and address those spots. But I'm pretty excited to see what the Giants do. Estime's a good player. I'd be fine with him in the mid-rounds.
Yeah, can't wait to see what happens in this NFL draft. We are 3 weeks away from the draft. 3 weeks from today, the NFL draft will begin. And I can't wait, of course, guys. We are going to be live on the channel for that. We're going to be hitting you with reaction videos and uploads and short form videos, articles, everything covering the New York Giants 2024 draft class. We are going to be providing it to you, and we can't wait to do so. We are so excited for this pre-draft process to finally come to an end and for the madness to begin on April 25th, Thursday evening. Can't wait to do it. Make sure to stay tuned because we've got plenty of great New York Giants content coming right your way on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.